Inflation just reached a 30-year high, and it might even be higher than what the government is saying. Is hyperinflation soon going to wipe us out and devastate the economy, and all the store shelves are going to be devoid of food, and you are going to die of starvation? I'm going to introduce a new type of inflation that you've never heard of and talk about why inflation is even worse than you think. Hi, I'm Keith Weinhold. This is Get Rich Education. Now, there are a few ways to spot inflation. We've got to start with classic inflation. An example of that might be when your favorite food item moves off of the dollar menu. In fact, a latest measure of consumer price inflation, the government reported CPI, is here at 5.4%, but it's been running between 5 and 6% lately. Classic inflation. Now, when there's been a lower supply, like there have been lately with supply chain disruptions, well, that makes people want to pay more for that thing because it's in scarce supply. So low supply and supply chain disruptions fuel higher inflation. Understand that supply chain shortages oftentimes make people want to hoard items. So just imagine typical items at a supermarket, whether that's bacon or frozen vegetables or oats, and someone hears about there being shortages coming. So say that one shopper comes in and takes 1/3 of a supermarket's bacon. Okay, well, what happens when the next shopper comes by? They've heard about shortages and they see that the supermarket only has 2/3 of its normal amount of bacon, so what's going to go on in their mind? Oh, they're going to think, well, I better buy more. I see a shortage right in front of me right now, and this is a cascading effect. This makes this a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's how this can get out of control. That's how low supplies fuel inflation. Now, besides just inflation, there's also a phenomenon known as stagflation. That occurred close to 50 years ago in the 1970s. Stagflation is a portmanteau of the words stagnant and inflation. I've discussed that before, but just as a review, that is the combination of a stagnant economy with high inflation. I don't think we have much risk of that right now. I think the economy is getting back up off its feet, and it will not be a stagnant economy. Then there is shrinkflation. That's when the price of something stays exactly the same, but yet the quantity that you get goes down. Just imagine the increasing amount of air in a potato chip bag, so that instead of getting 12 ounces of potato chips, you're now only getting 10 ounces. But of course, they don't make any sort of splashy design on the front of the bag that says that you're getting any less product now. But sure enough, if down the road they take that from 10 ounces back up to 12 ounces, number one, they're going to tell you that you're getting 20% more, and number two, they're probably going to charge more as well. But that's shrinkflation, paying the same and getting less. Now, it's time to add another type of inflation to the list. This is pretty similar to what I have called service inflation in recent videos, and I've really got to give credit to someone else that coined this term. That person is NPR's Greg Rosowski. He coined the term skimpflation. What is skimpflation? That's when businesses are skimping on you with their services. Skimpflation is everywhere lately. If you've noticed it taking you longer to get through the drive-thru, you're certainly not alone. And other examples of skimpflation include shutting down the tram at Disneyland, so it takes you longer to get around or longer to get to and from the parking lot. Domino's taking longer to deliver pizzas. If you need to phone an airline keeping you on hold for a longer period of time. And you know, actually a longer tail evidence of skimpflation is 25 years ago, a travel agent typically coordinated all your travel for you with the flights and the rental cars and the hotels and the logistics and all of that. Well, that got outsourced a few decades ago to Americans. You need to plan all of that yourself now, no matter what country you live in. Businesses are skimping you. This is skimpflation. Hey, go ahead and put a YouTube like on this if you like material like this. It doesn't mean you like skimpflation. It means you like having an awareness of it. We're going to talk about what you can do about it before the video's done here. I'd appreciate the YouTube like. And in a lot of cases, you know, businesses are not doing this deliberately. They're really facing this perfect storm of challenges right now. We have complications stemming from the sickness that's been going around for about 2 years now. We have supply chain issues that increase the cost of goods. We have labor shortages that leave businesses short-staffed. That's really the big one when it comes to skimpflation. So yeah, skimpflation, service inflation, we're not talking so much about goods and tangible products, but it's really about services. In fact, I was reading recently how one columnist made a trip to CVS, the drugstore, and here's the skimpflation he experienced. Most of the items that he wanted were locked in cases to avoid theft because inflation widens the disparity between the haves and the have-nots. It took him 3 times as long to go get someone to unlock the case so that he could get the items out than if he could have just accessed them himself. And then there were self-checkout kiosks rather than someone helping him check out. So really the rise of this with fewer employees working means that you have to take the time to check out the items and you can't score your own phone. You're getting a lower service level. This is service inflation or skimpflation. And there's one road that this all leads to, and that is probably Amazon Prime. I actually have my own example of a skimpflation. 2-factor authentication is continuing to be more and more prevalent. It used to be you could go to nearly any website, just enter your username and password and you were in. You can still do that in a lot of cases, but increasingly, once you enter your username and password, now the website says, well, wait, we need to text you this 6-digit or 8-digit code, and then you can enter it, and then you can access it. It just takes more of your time. That's skimpflationary. And really, skimpflation is a big reason why the 5.4% recently reported CPI might actually be higher. How high is inflation really? Well, first of all, let's put a ceiling on this. Let's talk about how high it's not. Check out this tweet from Jack Dorsey a while ago. He says that hyperinflation is here. Jack Dorsey's wrong. He doesn't understand what hyperinflation means. There's a big difference between hyperinflation and high inflation. Hyperinflation, most economists agree, that means an inflation rate of 50% per month or more. That's what hyperinflation is. We haven't seen that in the United States. I don't think we're going to see that anytime soon. Jack Dorsey just doesn't know what he's talking about here. High inflation is here. But hyperinflation, we have seen recent examples of that in the world with the situation in Venezuela. When Venezuelans were actually buying currency in the World of Warcraft video game rather than putting their faith in the Venezuelan bolivar because it was hyperinflationary. We've had examples, yeah, that really happened. We've had examples in the recent past of some nations' economies when they're going through hyperinflation. People are heating their homes and putting it in the fireplace, the dollar bills, because they're worth so little. That's hyperinflationary. No one's doing that. That's not going to happen anytime soon. So let's not get too out of control. So the government measures are the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, how much more it costs consumers to buy stuff on a year-over-year basis. The PPI, the Producer Price Index, which is different. That's how much it costs producers to make stuff. That happens a few months ahead of the CPI, which is how much it costs consumers to buy stuff once that item's been produced. And that PPI has been 7 to 8% recently. The government usually looks at the core PCE, the core personal consumption expenditures index, in order to make policy decisions. Shadow Stats is a really interesting resource. Shadow Stats, and I've talked to their founder on the phone before, John Williams. What they basically do is they tell you how the government used to report inflation in the 80s or 90s, but they manipulated the CPI and the PPI. So if you go ahead and look at what those numbers would be based on the way it used to be calculated, which is more authentic, oftentimes inflation is 8, 10, and 12%. Shadow Stats is an interesting resource. Now, other ways to mention inflation are consider commodities. A commodity is a really good barometer of inflation because they don't change. Take copper, for example. A pound of copper is always a pound of copper throughout time. So if you can get together a basket of commodities, that's not all you need, but it gives you some idea because that's an item that does not change over time. You cannot take the median automobile, for example, over time and measure inflation that way because automobiles have greater computerization and innovations in safety and things like that. They change. It's harder. It skews the numbers. You can't track inflation nearly as well. A restaurant sandwich, you can't use that because sandwiches often change in size and ingredients. Most restaurant sandwiches wouldn't work for measuring inflation. But yeah, a commodity like copper or zinc, something that's on the periodic table of elements, something that doesn't change, that can help you track inflation. Now, I'm actually more bullish on the future of the economy than a lot of people. You know, a lot of my contemporaries made a number of predictions about how housing was going to crash and the economy is going to fall apart. I don't think that's true. You know, Yogi Berra said something about predictions. Yogi said predictions are really hard to make, especially about the future. That's why so many people got them wrong. The economy is strengthening. In fact, inflation can be, not always, but it can be one measure that the economy is strengthening because people can pay more for things and they can afford those things as long as wages are keeping up proportionally with higher prices. The Fed is tapering the amount of dollars. They've been pumping so many dollars into the economy, they're tapering that down so that the middle of next year there won't be any additional liquidity stimulus because they feel like the economy can withstand less money supply. And that is really the precursor to raising interest rates, which could potentially happen next year because this economy can withstand higher rates. So that's really another signal that the economy is strong. Of course, higher rates tamp down on inflation, which is one big reason why they want to reduce this additional money supply and increase rates. And hey, I know not everyone is feeling the prosperity. It's definitely an uneven recovery. In the past couple weeks, I have gone jogging in familiar places in the cities of New Orleans, Louisiana, and Anchorage, Alaska. And in both those places, I've seen homeless people where I never saw homeless people before. I've seen more homeless people overall. Yeah, it definitely hurts consumers and everyday people disproportionately, this inflation, where it benefits you if you're in the investor class. Hey, go ahead and put a YouTube like on this if you haven't, if this is at least raising your awareness of inflation and what's going on in the economy. Yes, I think there is a likelihood that supply chains will stabilize over the next year. There are definitely going to be some hiccups. I'm generally bullish about this economy the way it's set up now. I mean, in the latest jobs report, which had high expectations, the United States even exceeded and cruised past those high expectations. In fact, back in October, 531,000 jobs were added. The unemployment rate has fallen from 4.8% to 4.6%. It's kind of funny to think about an unemployment rate when there are millions more available jobs than there are even workers that want to take them right now. And you know, a lot of people made these dire predictions about real estate and about the economy, but what those people failed to consider was government support. Yeah, naturally, without government support, the economy might have fallen apart, but with government support, even if that causes more pain down the road, it has helped pull this economy back together. You can say what you will about it being irresponsible for the long term, but it is helping pull us out of this steep but short-lived recession we've had, whether that's paving over the world with dollars or helping people that couldn't make their mortgage payments with forbearance, which legally allowed them to postpone payments until down the road. The government stepped in. That's the difference. That's why a lot of people that made dire predictions were wrong. And remember, as investors, the one thing that you need to do as an investor is tilt the chart. Whether you're investing in stocks or mutual funds or real estate or ETF or gold or cryptocurrency, anytime that you look at a chart and it does not say inflation adjusted when it's showing a price trend line, and most charts don't, remember, you need to tilt the chart a few degrees clockwise in order to account for that. That's the difference between a nominal return and a real return. Nominal means a return in name only, say 12%, but if you have to subtract out 5% inflation, that gives you a 7% real return after it's adjusted for inflation. Tilt the chart. So in order to keep dollars out of the consumer class and into the investor class, take action. With real estate investing, you actually profit from inflation 3 ways at the same time with what I've coined elsewhere as the inflation triple crown. You win with asset price inflation, debt debasement, and cash flow enhancement when you tie up income property with long-term fixed interest rate debt. I'll put that video up here. This is important. This is actionable stuff, how you can actually profit from inflation and turn this inflation to your advantage with the inflation triple crown. My name's Keith Weinhold. Thanks so much for stopping by, but as always, you weren't here for me, you were here for you. We'll see you in the next video.